Gavel then. Ready to go. Ready to go.
I can't whistle or I would.
No, it's okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Mr. President.
Yes, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Regent President Many Deeds.
Here.
Regent Vice President Walsh.
Here.
Regent Atwell. Regent Bechtel. Regent Vogus.
Here.
Regent Cologne.
Here.
Regent Greavy. Regent Jones.
Here.
Regent Klein.
Here.
Regent Miller.
Here.
Regent Pash.
Here. Here.
Regent Drew Peterson.
Here.
Regent Chris Peterson.
Here.
Regent Rye. Regent Sackle.
Here.
Regent Hecker. Regent Underly.
Here.
Regent Weatherly.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, as usual, before we start with the agenda items, is there anyone who would wish to declare a conflict regarding any of the matters on open session today? I'm learning to look at the monitor too. I want to make sure Hector doesn't have an objection. Hi, Hector. Thanks. Rodney, how are you? Good. All right, there's no conflicts that have been declared, so we can proceed. Welcome to the February Board of Regents meeting. I'd like to thank Chancellor Blank and her team for the warm welcome and for hosting this meeting. It's always a good time to come to Union South, stay here, and just walk downstairs and go to a meeting. So thank you a lot for that. Before we get started, I believe President Thompson has a couple of introductions to make. President Thompson.
And thank you, President Deed. I'm very pleased, and we are from the system to welcome back Paige Smith. She's coming back to UW System Administration. Paige has been named as UW System's next Chief Compliance Officer, succeeding Katie Ignikowski in this very important role. Paige previously held roles at UW System Administration, at UW-Whitewater, and most recently served as Vice Chancellor for Administrative Services at UW-Platteville. And I can understand after being around Paige the last several weeks why all of these individuals were upset when they lost her. In leading the work of UW System's Office of Compliance and Integrity, Paige is going to oversee a variety of federal and state legal and regulatory compliance issues, including Title IX, ethics, audit reviews, safety, and risk management, human resources and employment relations, campus safety and security, budget planning, emergency management, youth programs. She's going to do it all. And policy development, implementation, and many more. So thank you, Paige, for doing that. And with an 18-year career in higher education and deep experience in legal and compliance matters, Paige is well positioned to continue to cultivate in an environment that fosters ethics and integrity and preserves public trust. Welcome back, Paige. Please stand up so we can all. It's also my pleasure, Mr. President and members of the board, to introduce Dr. Maria Cuso. She was recently named to the permanent position of provost, which she was acting in, and vice chancellor for academic affairs at UW Superior. And while serving as interim provost since June of 2019, she's been tireless and proactive in helping the campus navigate one of the most challenging times facing the university. And I have to personally say, Maria, you're an outstanding person, and I thank you so very much. Every time I come to the campus, I love seeing you. You're such a wonderful human being. Maria is a tenured professor in the Department of Human Behavior, Justice, and Diversity. She continues to serve on Superior's COVID response team as part of Chancellor Walker's staff. She's been key in creating strategies for student and instructor success. Maria has led or co-led several campus strategic initiatives, including the Forward Superior Strategic Plan, which we're working on right now and hope to have some very positive results. And I thank you for all of those things, Maria. And also the Campus Successful Higher Learning Commission, He's also been closely involved in strengthening relations with technical college partners, as well as exploring the university's opportunities for public-private partnerships, which we have a lot going on right now, and it looks very exciting. Welcome, Provost Puso. I know you could not travel, and I just want you to give us a big wave and that charming smile of yours. So thank you. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, President Thompson. Well, the next thing we have to do is approve the records of the December 9th and 10th meeting of the Board of Regents, December 20th and January 21st special meeting of the Board of Regents, and the January 28th meeting of the Board of Regents Executive Committee, which have been provided to you. May I have a motion to approve these? So moved. Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Well, now this is time for my report, and we have several things to talk about, so I'll get right to it. The report of the Wisconsin Technical College System Board from January has been provided. Are there any comments or questions regarding that? Hearing nothing, I'll move on. And the next item on my report is to provide an update on the search for the next chancellor of the UW-Madison campus. As you know, in December, President Thompson and I announced the appointment of the 21-member Search and Screening Committee, chaired by Regent Vice President Karen Walsh and Professor Susan Hagnes, Department Chair of the UW-Madison Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. She serves as Vice Chair. A national search was launched in January with the assistance of the executive search firm of AGB Search. Regent Walsh and members of the Search and Screening Committee held a series of listening sessions with UW-Madison faculty, academic and university staff, students, alumni, and community members to hear their views on the qualities and characteristics to be sought in the next chancellor. The Search and Screen Committee, which includes members of all of the groups mentioned, as well as regents, will consider the valuable input from the campus stakeholders throughout the search process as we review applicants and interview candidates. Later this spring, the Search and Screen will forward a slate of recommended candidates to a special regent committee that will include Regents Bogos, Jones, Klein, Miller, and Walsh. I will serve as chair of that committee. We will recommend candidates to the full board for their consideration later this spring. We've got some busy months ahead, but I hope and expect that at the end of the process, we'll identify a worthy leader for UW-Madison. Speaking of worthy leaders, I would like to congratulate Jay Rothman, who was recently approved by the members of this board as the next president of the University of Wisconsin System. Mr. Rothman is CEO and chairman of the Foley and Lardner firm in Milwaukee since 2011 and a member of that firm since 1986. Jay's leadership and executive management skills will be an invaluable asset for our university system moving forward. I'm confident that in partnership with our chancellors, faculty, and staff, he will strengthen the UW for our students and the people of Wisconsin. Once again, I'd like to thank my colleagues on this board and the student staff and faculty throughout the system for their willingness to participate in this important search. Deciding on the next leader of the UW system is a very significant responsibility, and I appreciate your commitment and close attention to detail. Thank you for that. I'd also like to thank one of our former regent colleagues, Mike Felbo, for his willingness to serve as interim UW system president for the period after President Thompson steps down in mid-March until President Rothman arrives on June 1st. One of the challenges the new president will face is how to grow our student enrollment and support student success all along the way, accumulating in more UW degrees. This is a top priority for this board also. I want to bring your attention to a new report that came out last week on student graduation. The National Student Clearinghouse Research Center found that 69% of the students who started higher education at U.S. public four-year universities in the fall of 2015 graduated by spring of 2021. By comparison, 74% of those enrolled at UW system universities graduated in the same time period, a 5% point higher than the national average. Going excellent. Our universities are putting student success front and center, even amid the pandemic challenges. And I want to thank the chancellors, our faculty, our staff, on how much work they're doing to make sure this happens. While it uses slightly different ways of counting, the UW System Accountability Dashboard also shows our graduation rates are on an upward trajectory generally. And I'd encourage everyone to go to the Accountability Dashboard on our website to see how we're doing and meeting the high standards that we've set in working for students and taxpayers. Next, I have a quick calendar item. I'd like to remind Regents to hold the date of March 9th for this year's 18th annual Research in the Rotunda event, one of the UW System's signature and most significant outreach events. Due to COVID, this event was canceled last year. We're looking forward to once again bringing together outstanding undergraduate and student researchers from all across the system, together with their faculty advisors, into the Capitol Rotunda to share their research findings on a variety of important topics with legislators, state leaders, UW alumni, and other supporters. This year, for the first time, students will have the option to produce a brief video about their research, which will be featured on the Research in the Rotunda website. So if you can't make it to the Capitol, be sure to go online and check out some of the impressive work that's being done by our students. Finally, and very importantly, with February being Black History Month, I would like to reiterate the long-standing support this board has for advancing greater diversity throughout the university system. I believe we're not only saying it, but we're working on achieving it, and we should continue to do that. A diverse campus community and the many ways that can be defined is integral to fulfilling our primary mission, which is to provide a high quality education. It is also vital, as events of the past year have shown, to help maintain a healthy society and strong communities. In that spirit, tomorrow morning, we will be honoring the recipients of the Regents Diversity Awards. We had an impressive pool of nominees, and I look forward to hearing from our winners. The work they do is important and makes a real difference. It's always inspiring. I'd also like to congratulate the people who were not winners of the award. I feel that they are winners at every campus, in spite of not getting an award. Finally, I'd like to provide an update regarding our meeting calendar. The one-day Regent meeting scheduled for March 10th has been canceled. As such, our next regular meeting will be April 7th and 8th at UW-Stevens Point. That concludes my report for today. The next item on our agenda is the host campus presentation from Chancellor Blank.
Thank you, Regent Many Deeds. We're always delighted to host the Regents in February. It's good to have you here in Union South and on campus, and I appreciate everything that you do for our campus. I want to talk a little bit today about UW-Madison and the journey we've been on in the last decade and some of the challenges that we're facing. But let me start at a slightly higher level and talk about flagship universities, big research universities. These are complex institutions. At UW-Madison, we manage 48,000 students, 20,000 faculty and staff. We have a $3.6 billion budget, and we have a very diverse group of stakeholders from all around the country. These institutions are deeply important to their state and indeed to the nation. On the one hand, they educate some of the most educated citizens in the state. At Madison, we graduated a record number of undergraduates and professional school students last year, and those highly trained, highly skilled people are integral to the future of the state. They're important for discovery and innovation. People and families benefit directly from our work, from more effective treatments for cancer, to better farming techniques, to better water management. And finally, Wisconsin businesses benefit directly from the work of these institutions. At UW-Madison, we provide the building blocks for scientific advancement, which businesses in turn take and turn into products. Those contributions, both in education and research, are important to the economic growth of the states in which these institutions sit. We fuel startups, we attract companies, to places that want to be near a top research institution. And we generate revenue. The state provides just 15% of our revenue. That means we generate more than $3 billion in revenue on our own every year. For instance, we bring in $1.5 billion from out of state simply through the federal dollars, the research dollars, and the out-of-state tuition dollars that we attract into this state that would not be here otherwise. But the strength, the quality, the reputation of these big universities is only created over time. And, it's one of my favorite political figures. I think I've quoted this to this group before. Daniel Patrick Moynihan once said, if you want to create a great city, and I would say a great state, create first a great university, and then wait 100 years. You don't build these things, you don't build reputation fast, right? And indeed, it was 100 years ago when UW-Madison really started soaring as a major research institution. To build a university with a world-class reputation that attracts faculty, research capacity, and students requires many years of strategic and good investments. And to maintain that reputation is equally difficult. These institutions, despite the solidity that you see when you drive down the street, are fragile institutions, particularly in this day and age. Faculty are increasingly mobile. I can promise you my top faculty get asked about outside offers and other appointments probably once a month. They can move anytime and they can move fast. Students are mobile. Every year, a new group of students makes admissions decisions. And if this is the year they decide they're not coming here, we could have a completely different admissions year than we had the year before. And I will tell you, the competition for research dollars is fierce. NIH dollars, our biggest source of funding, only about 20% of applicants get funded in any given year, which is to say it's much easier to not be funded than it is to be funded. So don't ever take the quality of these flagship institutions of UW-Madison for granted. If we aren't working every day to maintain and grow this quality, it will erode. Maintaining quality requires maintaining the support of the state and its citizens. As a public institution, top quality research universities require bipartisan support across administrations, across parties, and across political environments. I've been here in leadership at UW-Madison for 9 years, and I want to use this time to first tell you some of the things we've done I'll take the last decade in general, and then I want to talk about some of the challenges that the university is facing and that I leave to the next chancellor. And I will, in those challenges, indicate the ways in which I think the Board of Regents needs to be helpful in helping us resolve them. And you're not going to hear a lot of things you haven't heard before from me. So let me start with a list of things that we've accomplished. On the education front, we've expanded the quality, size, and diversity of UW students, while also at the same time improving financial aid and access. And all of this helps us serve the state better. So let me talk about accomplishments. Accomplishment one, higher quality students. We typically in the past have measured this by test scores, and I can show you how our test scores have gone up over the last decade, but we're now test optional, so that's not as good a measure. So instead, I show you the number of National Merit finalists enrolled at Madison. We've more than doubled that number since 9 years ago. That's true both at the national level. It's also true we show almost a doubling within the state of Wisconsin as well. We're also serving students better with expanded mental health services, a wonderful new health wellness facility, expanded advising, and a variety of other ways in which student needs have shifted and we've shifted our services. For instance, in recent years, we've created some new curriculum. We started an undergraduate degree in data science and one in global health. We started master's degrees in business analytics and financial economics. Great teaching, a strong campus culture, and a constantly evolving modern curriculum is what brings really great students to this campus. Second accomplishment, we've expanded enrollment. Despite declines in Wisconsin high school students, our applications at UW-Madison have not declined. In fact, just the opposite. Our Wisconsin applications have been pretty steady, despite declines in the number of high school graduates. Our out-of-state applicants have absolutely soared. In my first fall here, I remember people were very, very happy because we had received 30,000 applications, which was an all-time record at that point. Well, 9 years later, we've just gotten word, our applications were all due last week, that we've now received well over 60,000 applications. We've more than doubled applications in those 9 years. With your help in revising the in-state, out-of-state requirements, we've been able to take advantage of our rapidly growing pool of first-rate out-of-state students. Why does that matter? First of all, these students add diversity, and they pay tuition at a rate that supports our programs and subsidizes our in-state students. We would not be as great a university as we are if we didn't have some of those out-of-state students here. And this has been particularly important at a time when in-state tuition has been frozen for 9 and potentially now 10 years. Our ability to attract out-of-state students is also critical to the future of Wisconsin. We all know Wisconsin needs more highly skilled workers, and we are the best source of that at UW-Madison. Every year, we bring in more than 20,000 smart graduate and undergraduate students to this state, to this campus. There is no other institution in the state that comes close to bringing that number of talented individuals into the state. And we then need to work with the state, with local businesses, in order to keep and attract those students so that they stay in Wisconsin long term. Our rising applications reflect our strong reputation as an educational institution. We are, as I've told you a number of times, a hot school right now, and particularly on the coast. And the rising demand is not slowing down. This year alone, it looks like we will have at least a 15% increase over last year in our applications. In addition to increases in quality and increases in numbers, we've also increased diversity. As we've grown in size and strength, we've done a number of things. We have more students of color. In 2017, our incoming freshman class had about 700 students from historically underrepresented groups. This year's freshman class has more than 1,200. 25% of our freshman class that came in last fall are students of color. 15% of that freshman class are underrepresented students of color. Those are all-time highs. They don't happen by chance. We've got an admissions office and a financial aid office that has been very strategic in working at growing those numbers. Meanwhile, we've also maintained a very strong number of first-gen students, which is equally important. It is important that bringing in a more diverse class by itself simply isn't enough. The institution itself has to become more diverse, more open, more multicultural for those students to feel at home. So we've done a lot of things on that front. And one of the things you have in these red folders that you got is a copy of our campus climate report, which we do twice a year, which tells you what we did last semester, what we're doing this semester on the diversity front. Among the things we've done, we've greatly expanded faculty hiring. 31 new faculty of color joined us last year. 243 faculty of color have joined us in the last 5 years. And that's happened in part because of a focused effort from the center for us to help departments attract people from historically underrepresented groups in their field. Almost all our schools and colleges have diversity plans, as do a growing number of departments. And the issue of diversity is more so than at any time I've ever seen in any university at the top of mind of lots of our faculty and staff. For instance, our annual diversity forum attracted nearly 3,000 attendees, virtual and in person. That's a chance to learn from experts and from one another about what are we doing across campus that's working and how do we scale that and bring it to other parts of campus. We've also successfully launched our Rainy Nolan campaign, which is a fundraising campaign among our alums to provide dollars for programming, scholarships, and faculty research. I launched this, I guess, a year and a half ago in the end of the summer. And my hope at that point, which I think I announced, was that I wanted to raise $10 million for this fund. Well, we're sitting here a year and a half later. This fund is now at almost 70 million. And that's a reflection of how engaged our faculty, staff, and students are in raising money, but also how engaged our alumni are in wanting to help us diversify. We had 82 students in the fall freshman class coming in with the newly available scholarships from the Rainy Nolan Fund, and that is only going to grow. In addition to diversity, we've also expanded access. and especially access for Wisconsin students. We were among our peer schools, we had some of the lowest amounts of aid available for scholarships. When I walked through the door, I remember looking at these numbers. The state of Wisconsin gives relatively small amounts of money to low-income scholarships compared to other states, and we had very little institutional dollars in this. Since 2007, we have quadrupled our institutional dollars from 25 million to 100 million. And it's that money that has allowed us to implement things like Bucky's Tuition Promise. We've expanded professional master's programs, both in-person, hybrid, and online. And we're now launching undergraduate online opportunities, which are aimed at a whole new group of people who've never been at UW-Madison before, those who aren't going to be residential students, who are at a point in their career that they understand they now need a college degree. They might have some college credits, but they're going to come back and finish their degree with us. And I'm very excited about that. So, these access issues are important for us to attract the diversity, the class, to serve the state in the way that we want to. The competition for top students within the United States at U.S. universities is really fierce, particularly in the Midwest and the Northeast, where the number of high school graduates is declining and is projected to keep declining for more than the next decade. Very few schools, I don't know of another one that I'd have to go looking, have been able to do what we've done at UW. With substantial increases in applications, we've been able to turn that in turn into increased size of our classes, higher quality, and greater diversity. But education is only one part of our mission. And we've also been working hard on the research front. So let me talk a little bit about research. We are a top 10 university in research expenditures. Last year, we brought in terms of new awards, $1.5 billion. We spent 1.4. That says the numbers are going to keep going up in expenditures, right? Because we're bringing in more money than we spent. Bringing in money will in turn be spent in the future years. There is no other research facility, public or private, in the state of Wisconsin that comes close to us in size and scope. We raised and spent $1.4 billion on research. The next largest school within the UW system raised and spent $61 million. That's less than 4% of what we have. When I arrived, research expenditures were declining. You can see this. We have worked very hard to turn that around, and over the entire 9-year period, our research dollars grew by 17%. As you can see from this graph, the declines happened during the first two biennium of when we were facing very deep budget cuts here in 2011, 2013, 2015. And the main thing that happened here is we lost top faculty. We weren't paying them, we were cutting programs, and we were under enormous pressure. And our top faculty just, I'm going someplace where I'm going to be paid a competitive salary. The political dispute around tenure did not help this either. In FY 2021, which closed at the end of June, we submitted over 100 more extramural proposals than the previous year. And even better, we grew our new awards by an increase of over 15%. We have turned these numbers around. But let me be clear about the level of competition here. The competition for this money is fierce. Over the last 5 years, our research expenditures increased by just under 18%. That's a lot of growth in a 5-year period. But if you look at the top 5 research expenditure universities, theirs increased by just under 25%. If we actually wanted to be in the top 5, we'd have to be growing our research by almost 25% a year. That's almost impossible, right? I mean, at least as I look at our numbers and our possibilities. Our biggest challenge is we need to stay where we are. We need to stay in the top 10. We need to remain competitive, and that means we're going to be growing our research dollars 15, 20% a year. That means a lot of regular hard work. So if we're going to continue to grow our research enterprise, it requires strategic and targeted efforts, which we are doing. And I know Steve Ackerman talked about this a little bit in the READY committee. There are big funding opportunities right now in biomedical sciences, atmospheric sciences, data science, and quantum physics. And we want to compete successfully in those fields. We've recently met with senior Army officials to explore partnership opportunities with the Department of Defense in autonomous vehicles, video game development, and game theory. Having top faculty is absolutely key to competing effectively for research. And we've expanded our faculty expertise in a couple of ways. I've talked before about our cluster hire program, designed to bring in groups of faculty across multiple departments in a field that we want to grow. That's been incredibly effective for us. We've also been growing faculty more generically across many areas. Our faculty size shrank in the 1990s, and in the past few years, we've actually expanded our faculty by about 200 people. But we are still about 100 faculty short of where we were 30 years ago when there were 8,000 fewer students on campus. We're serving more students with fewer faculty, the result, again, of many years of budget cuts, even with the expansion that we've gone through. We've needed to do this. As we've increased class size, we had to have more faculty. It also, at the same time, however, helps us grow research because more faculty means more people competing for research dollars. Another major opportunity is industry research partnerships. And again, I know we've talked with the READY committee about this at length. UW-Madison has not always been the easiest place for companies to work with, and we've had a reputation of being difficult, which has kept our research dollars from industry low. We've worked very hard to change that. This only changes slowly over time. At the heart of our work is collaborative efforts between our schools and colleges and the Office of Business Engagement, which was created 5 years ago to improve these types of relationships. And we are seeing results. Industry dollars flowing into UW-Madison from our corporate partners support not only research, but also student scholarships, internships, public service projects, a whole variety of things. And I note that our work with industry is much more than just tapping into revenue streams and with the private sector. It's actually central to our mission of public outreach, to keeping businesses here in Wisconsin supplied with students, with keeping students here in Wisconsin businesses. It's a great example of the Wisconsin idea in practice. One example of our need for growth in both educational programming as well as research is computer science. A first-class computer and data science program is an absolute necessity for any top research university these days. Computer science isn't about one department. Every single discipline across the university is increasingly engaging in data science techniques, has to be deeply involved with various computer science advances. You know, this is across the university, and it's not just about building a department, it's about building strength over all the disciplines. For a state that wants to build its reputation as a regional and national beacon for the high-tech industry, it's also pretty important for that. We created the School of Computer Data and Information Science that we call CDIS to respond explicitly to these sorts of demands, including, of course, the demand for students. CDIS and computer science is now our number one major among all students. 5 years ago, we had 300 undergraduate majors in computer science. We currently have over 2,000. And thousands of undergraduates from every major are taking computer and data science classes. So one of the first introductory classes that we offered aimed at non-majors in computer science, talking about computer science issues, enrolled students from 72 different majors. So, you know, the aim of CDIS is both serve your own students, serve your own faculty, and then serve the rest of the university as well. Now we need a building for this department. You can't have a first-rate school like this serving the whole university in the facility it's currently in. We could have walked you through that last night if you wanted to see another deteriorated facility. And I might note this also would be serving our very successful American Family Data Science Institute. We've kicked off a major fundraising campaign for this building and still have some money to raise, but this is one that we're going to do entirely on our own without state dollars because we need it done and we need it done fast, and that won't happen if we go through the state. All of the things I've talked about on the education side and on the research side require resources. With frozen tuition, with declining state investment, we've needed to generate our own investment income at UW-Madison. And I've worked to try to change the culture at UW-Madison around this, to tell people your future is actually in your hands. You need to be entrepreneurial on these issues. We can't just wait for the state to give us more funding. We know that's a pretty losing game for all the bienniums that I've been here. If you want to maintain the quality of UW-Madison, we have to be in charge of our future and thinking about how we generate revenue. Now, I won't say state funding is important. It is money that we can use broadly for education that isn't tied in other ways. But we know that that funding is not likely to grow a lot. So how do we work on funding? Many of you have seen this graph before. I think I've showed it to you at other times. The top is our six-part strategy we've been pursuing since about 2014, since I came. Expanding research and development dollars, I've already talked about that. Expanding summer session, this is a win-win. Students get credits that they wouldn't otherwise complete. They're able to finish their schoolwork on time. I gave a goal to our summer session people that they needed to grow summer session by 10% a year for 5 years. And those 5 years are up, and they have done it. And they're going to keep growing. The students take advantage of summer to complete distribution requirements. That drives down time to degree, and it drives down student debt. Expanded philanthropic support. This was a top priority when I arrived, and I've worked very closely with Mike Knetter and the UW Foundation to improve our fundraising mechanisms and our capacity, particularly working with deans and department chairs. So we've become a much better fundraising organization. We just completed the 6-year Always Forward campaign. I know a few of you were involved with that. In 2015, we announced this campaign. We had a big debate on the goal. And we finally decided we were going to set it and publicly announce it at $3.2 billion. And I will tell you, about half of the people working with us thought we were just being crazy. You know, that was more than double what we'd gotten in our previous campaign. Didn't think we'd possibly achieve it. And announcing a goal we weren't going to achieve was not going to be helpful. Well, we just completed this campaign at the end of December. And rather than raising $3.2 billion, we've raised $4.2 billion. And I really want to thank all of the alums, all of the people inside the university who worked on that. This is a game changer for us. It's one of the reasons we have a lot of new student scholarship dollars. It's one of the reasons we're better at retaining faculty with all sorts of additional faculty research funds and faculty cares. In addition to philanthropy, as you all know, we've set market-based tuition for out-of-state students. That's because of our partnership with the Regents. You've allowed us to do that, which has let us tap into this very rapidly growing pool of out-of-state applicants who are highly qualified, bringing them here to the University of Wisconsin. As I've noted before, we've expanded our professional master's degrees. You could put our undergraduate online program in that. That's just starting up. And we've been growing our undergraduate enrollment. As again, I think all of you know, we've now completed, I think, 5 years of growth. So we've finished the tranche that we set out for 5 years ago. We have a newly launched strategy, which is real estate development. There's some others we're thinking about. You're all very familiar with that topic, and you've all been partners in helping us begin that process of starting the real estate development efforts. What's been the impact of these efforts? You know, we don't raise money just because we like money. We're raising money because there are things we need to do around the university. We're raising money because the university's been in trouble with cuts in budgets and deterioration in some of what it's doing. I've told you already about the fact we put a lot of this new money into scholarships and Bucky's Tuition Promise. But let me tell you about 5 other areas that we can show direct lines between the new revenue we've raised, the investments we've made, and the outcomes that we're showing. Higher graduation rates, lower time to degree. Our investment in expanded advising and educational programs like the summer session have increased graduation rates, decreased time to degree, even as we're growing class size. Right. And, you know, there's a lot of great work among our faculty and staff making that happen. Our 6-year graduation rate is the highest we've ever seen. We're one of the top 10 schools in the publics. For our 6-year graduation rate, I think it's 89.2%. And I want it to get over 90, maybe next year. The new chancellor can claim credit for that. Our undergraduate time to degree is now 3.9 years, down from well over 4, only 6 or 7 years ago. We've reduced student debt. All of these things improve student debt. The share of undergraduates graduating with 0 debt is currently 57% on our campus. That compares to a national comparison of about 1/3 of students graduate without debt. So we're almost double the national average in the number of students who get out of here without having to borrow. And as I've told you before, the student default rate on our loans is below 1%. It's huge at the national level. It's over 3% at other Wisconsin schools. Equally important, we put some of this money into competitive faculty salaries. If you want to keep faculty, you got to pay them a market rate. When I arrived, our faculty were number 12 among our 12 peers in faculty salaries. And a number of our departments were 20 and 25% below their peers if you compared departmental salaries. It wasn't surprising that we were facing retention problems. We've made a number of very strategic investments in faculty salaries, particularly looking at high-ranked departments where salaries were 15 or 20% lower than among their peers, and saying this is particularly where we need to bring them up. And today, our faculty salaries are number 5 among our peer schools. They need to stay there. And it wouldn't take many bad years for us to sink right back down to number 12 again. So this is one that's a victory, but we have to keep it going. Competitive salaries for faculty alone aren't enough. Faculty come in part because they have great students, and graduate students are an important part of that. And we've greatly improved support for graduate students. Not only were our faculty salaries at the bottom of our 12 peers, our graduate students were at the bottom of our 12 peers. So we weren't getting the top graduate students either, which makes it hard to get the top faculty. We have now grown our stipends for our graduate students by more than 40%. I think we've grown 43, 44%. And we are now above the median, which is where we should be given the quality of our university among our peers on TA scholarships and salaries. And that's important. And then finally, you know all this. We've done some really major administrative improvements to make the university run better. This is ATP, we're in the middle of, you know as much about that as anyone. This is our cybersecurity investments. These are our title and total compensation efforts to raise staff salaries and provide competitive information about where our staff are ranked to others. And it's our investments in sustainability across the university, all of which have made the university run better and are important to our functioning. And then, the last thing that we've done, which is one of the things that, quite honestly, once it happened, people just took it for granted. And I'm so happy about this. We brought commencement back to Camp Randall. I did this my first year, and a bunch of people said, oh, we used to have 5 commencement ceremonies, depending on the letters of your last name, that ran one after the other in the Kohl Center. Can you imagine how dead that 5th ceremony was from the people on the platform? We couldn't get any speakers, because no speaker's going to come and give 5 repeat. We had some loyal alums who would show up and do our commencement addresses. So we moved to one big celebration in Camp Randall, unlimited number of parents and friends because there's seats for everyone. And we've gotten some great national speakers and attention. It is one of the best celebrations of the year. If you've not been to a UW-Madison commencement, there's plenty of seats. Come and join us. So having said all that, it's been a good run. We've done a lot of really important things to get this university out of where it was and back to where it should be. But there are a lot of challenges, and I want to run through a few of these and then talk about what we need from the Board of Regents in each of these areas. And let me start with lagging growth in revenues. I've told you how much money we raised and all the things that we've done. It's not enough. We were behind our peers, and we remain behind our peers. So if I showed you this graph back to 2000, I didn't do this because I wanted you to be able to see these differences, but we're all right on top of each other. The red line is us. The green line is our Big Ten peers. The blue line are our official peers, which includes some non-Big Ten schools and doesn't include all the Big Ten. All of us were right on top of each other all through these previous 5 decades. Similarly for 11 and 12, and then what happens? We start diverging. It's this time that I look at these data and I just say, we are in deep trouble. We are losing competitive advantage. Every one of our competitors is growing, and looks what's happening here. Why is that? In 2011, in 2009, in 2011, in 2013, and 2015, we had state budget cuts, and the 2015 state budget cut was particularly deep. And we just we weren't generating new revenue to overcome that. And so this didn't happen in any other school. There weren't budget cuts during those years. They were coming out of the recession, and their state budgets were looking good. They invested in their universities, and we didn't, right? And this is when we launched our 6-point strategy, and I said, we've got to catch up. And I've told you everything we've done. We've done an enormous amount. We have really generated additional revenue, but we haven't caught up. We are still behind our peers. When I say, if you want to look at the financial situation of UW-Madison, do not compare us to any other school in the state of Wisconsin. Compare us to the schools that we compete with, and we are still in trouble. We need to catch up. We need to keep going on this front, and we just aren't there yet. And some state investment is important. If we actually had 3 biennium like this, we'd be back down again and be worse than we were before, and we'd be back to losing faculty and losing students and all of the things that we've overcome. This is a fragile situation. Do not take for granted that because we've had a couple of good years in our own revenue fundraising, that we are where we should be and that we are competitive with our peers. So this one really worries me. We've done everything we can and we still haven't made up for those really bad years. What are my recommendations to all of you in the Board of Regents? If we're going to maintain our competitive position, we need ongoing support for UW-Madison's efforts to expand revenues and a commitment by the state and the system to continue funding UW-Madison at a level commensurate with its quality, its size, and the contributions it provides to the state. Cutting UW-Madison is a fool's journey if you really want to help the state. Many of you have seen the report that indicates that once you remove the funding that we have for programs that are unique to our campus, the medical school, the vet school, extension, our public media, we are basically getting about the same amount of money per student as UW-Milwaukee is. We're not any richer than the other schools. Don't bring us below that level. Challenge number 2, fewer state dollars for capital projects. In recent years, we've gotten approval for some really great projects, and I don't want to put that aside. The School of Veterinary Medicine, the new Letters in Science building, I deeply appreciate the support for that. These are transformative projects, and I appreciate the Regents' support, and I appreciate the legislative and the governor's support for these projects. But this isn't enough for us, given who we are and the facilities we need. Our share of state funding for capital projects has fallen steadily for decades. We are 52% of the system's total revenues. We receive 45% of the state appropriation. And given our much larger footprint, including properties all over the state, we're an even higher share of total property value in the system. Yet we have consistently received far less than this share of the capital budget. We're at 45% a decade ago. We're now down to 30%. That is a real problem. And our maintenance has not kept up. Buildings are not keeping up. I understand we are able to do more in raising private funds than some of the other schools inside the system. But we also have a much older set of buildings with much more deterioration and maintenance problems than many of the other schools. And at the Capital Planning and Budget Committee, Rob Kramer talked about how far we were behind in the maintenance of our buildings. Given the lack of funding, it has gotten progressively harder to do the things we need to do to keep our university functioning effectively. You know, we've had concrete falling off of Van Nuys. We've had concrete falling off of the humanities building. And, I have to go through the state legislature, the governor, the Board of Regents, the State Building Commission, before I can even fix the concrete, much less do what I need to do with these buildings, which is at least in one case, replace them. High on our list, for instance, are must-do projects. Many of you toured this. We've got to empty that humanities building. It is on the verge of failure. HVAC failure, structural failure, concrete failure, but I've got 2 more departments in it. The top is all the art department, and the basement is all the music department. Okay, I'm going to move everything else out with this new building the state approved. But I dare you to tell me I'm going to get the state legislature to fund an art department building and a music department building. I have to move these places. We've got to build another space or find another space for these units. And it's just a complete, I'm just stuck right here. And we have to have the flexibility to be in charge of this decision-making when we need to make it on our campus. So, on the one hand, we are so limited in how we can control the capital projects for a modern university, which to attract the faculty, the students, to do the research we need to do, has to have the facilities commensurate with that. And we just aren't in that world right now. You all toured the engineering building the other day. I can show you 15 other buildings on campus that look just as bad. Right? And I'm not going to get funding for those unless I can do something to put it together, and I need the flexibility to do that. At the same time, we are also constrained in terms of how we build buildings. This I haven't gotten there yet. Let me finish this. This graph shows a 5-year rolling average of investment in facilities. The black line is, sort of a standard for how much you need to spend given your capital size on a regular basis. And it's calculated by an outside firm. You can move that line up or down. It really doesn't matter. This is Wisconsin, right here, this is what we're spending every year relative to what we should be spending. These are our public peers. We are well below them. These, just to protect their privacy, because they don't have public information here, are some of the information we know about our privates, right? And so the Big Ten, the public schools, are falling behind the private schools, and we falling behind the other publics. You cannot maintain a first-rate university when you're investing only 1/5 of what you need every year in the maintenance of a very old set of buildings, many of which need renewal, if not a replacement. So, this is a problem, and our lack of investment over time has led to a deferred maintenance. What am I doing here? Deferred maintenance of $1.5 billion. That's a calculation, an outside company that does this sort of work with universities across the country. That's their estimate for us. It's the highest deferred maintenance estimate they said that they had seen among any of the publics. We can't let that keep growing. We've got to do something about this. So what are our constraints? Why can't we deal with this? You know the answer to that. Constraint number one, we have no borrowing authority. Every time we do major building renovations or construction that is not entirely funded by gifts and grants, we need the approval of the governor, the assembly, the Senate, the system, and the State Building Commission. And these buildings all get caught in a political calculation that have nothing to do with our research and education needs here on campus. This lack of control over our capital assets creates serious difficulties, particularly for a $3.6 billion organization whose reputation in part rests upon having facilities that look like students and faculty want to live there. No other state, you all know this, has a flagship or a system without borrowing authority. It puts the burden on us to find gift grant funding. And I'm telling you, there's just a whole lot of areas where we don't have gift grant funding. I don't have a major donor for an art building. I don't have the big donor for the music building I need. I certainly don't have donors to renovate buildings, replace HVAC systems, and replace steam tunnels, those sorts of things. We need state assistance, or we need the flexibility to deal with this ourselves. We're in this catch-22 right now. Challenge number two, and you know this as well as I do as well, when we do get money to build a building, we have no control over what happens in the process of building that building. The state signs the contracts, and we have no input into that process. The result has been contracts with very limited damage clauses and very limited delay penalties. Once the contract is signed, we have no authority over the project. We don't run it. We actually, in many cases, have very little input into it. We don't select subcontractors. We don't oversee the work. The result has been ongoing overruns and delayed projects. What do? We're on the hook for any new money that has to be spent. And we're on the hook for any delays in the delivery of that project for our programs and our people who need to be in the building. Again, no other flagship in the country has zero control over the building of its buildings, either the signing of the contracts or the supervision of the project itself. Example number one that you all know about right now is our chemistry building. I'm delighted to tell you it's open this semester with students. We're moving the research back in. It was supposed to be completed last summer. But two basic construction elements, the elevators and the HVAC systems, failed a month before it was supposed to open. This isn't expensive lab equipment that it's really hard to figure out how you calibrate it and put it in right. This is basic construction ABCs that were not done right. The result for chemistry is 9,000 students and 454 sections had to be moved within a month to spaces not designed for chemistry. We lost an estimated $3 million in research with labs that we had to close, and that's not yet a final number. The contracts had limited damage clauses and limited compensation for delays, and as a result, we are limited in our ability to hold anyone responsible for these problems, and we bear the costs of both the dollars and the delays. This inability to control decisions over capital renovation is really hurting us, and we need to do something about it. We end up paying the bills and bearing the costs, but we're the ones who have to work there. Recommendations to the Board of Regents for new projects and major renovations. We have to have greater control over these projects. It's Management 101, align incentives so the people who have to pay for and live in the space are responsible for getting them built and making sure they're built well and built on time. And number two, work with us to get more, to get program revenue bonding authority so that we have flexibility to manage our projects when we need to and build the things we have to build on campus, assuming we can afford them, right? All right, that's challenge number 2. You've heard me on that one before. Challenge number 3, one size fits all policies. This is probably the biggest frustration my provost has. UW-Madison is different from other system schools. We have a different mix of students. We have major research operations. We have different funding streams. And one size fit all projects from the system consistently make it hard for us to do our work and limit our competitiveness. So we have double the number of employees in the next largest system school. I've already told you that our research is huge compared to anybody else. And our students are different. They're in a different market. Almost all of them are applying out of state as well as in state. It's just not the same group. Furthermore, our $1.4 billion in research expenditures are on an entirely different scale, and we compete in a different market for faculty talent. There are times when UW-Madison needs to be treated differently, and we need some flexibilities. One example that was a great deal of frustration about 5-6 years ago was when we wanted to go on the Common App, and we were told we couldn't because the rest of the schools weren't going to be on the Common App. Our competitor schools are on the Common App. One reason why we have the increase in applications that we have is we were finally allowed to go on the Common App, so students who are applying to Michigan or to Illinois could also apply to us without going on and filling out an entirely different, and I might note, very klutzy application at that point. Then once we got approved to do this, we were told, yeah, we could go off the system app at some point in the very near future. We've now been told that's not going to happen. So even though only 12% of our applications come through the system app, our admissions office has to deal with 2 application systems, 2 different platforms, costs a lot of time and money going back and forth between that. This was one of those things where, again, we're just in a different market, and it caused real problems that we weren't able to do that very fast. And I can't tell you how long we had to argue for it before we got able to do it. Another example, which some of you have now heard about, the inflexible Board of Regents policy that requires us to seek Board of Regents approval for all contracts over $1 million, which is almost all of our contracts with major companies these days. It's peanuts in terms of amounts. I know that all of you try to expedite those contracts, and I want to thank Jess, who really works hard when we say we've got a contract that needs signing to get that in front of the right committee. But this, at a minimum, adds a month to the process. It occasionally adds more, and it's led us to lose out on a variety of industry contracts that we would otherwise have gotten, and adds to our reputation of being difficult to work with. Our peer institutions recognize this. Rob Kramer showed a slide to the Business and Finance Committee showing that basically none of our public peers have these sorts of dollar restrictions. Some of them, there's certain conflict of interest things you have to check, but no one's facing the sort of restrictions we are. And the delays that are inherent in this process are particularly difficult for clinical trials, where when a company comes to you, it's because you have certain patients and they want to launch that clinical trial immediately. And if you wait a month, those patients aren't in it because they need a treatment quite quickly. There's real issues with this. So recommendations on this issue: UW-Madison needs the ability to approve industry contracts and report quarterly to the Regents what we're doing. And I know we're going to come to you in April and try to get that approved. But more broadly, I hope you recognize that sometimes we operate in a different environment than many other system schools. And one-size-fits-all policies can really be difficult for us in terms of running the type of school that we need to run. Next challenge: 9 years of frozen tuition. We're completely out of step with the marketplace that we are in on in-state tuition. Our in-state tuition is further below our peers than is in-state tuition at any other UW system school relative to their peers. You can see here, Michigan is charging about $6,000 more per student. Minnesota is charging about $5,000 more. Ohio State's charging $1,500 more. Who are the 2 schools, the 2 publics we lose to? It's Michigan, Minnesota, and Illinois. And Illinois is almost $7,000 above us. As long as some of our closest peer schools receive 50% more in tuition dollars for every in-state student they admit, UW-Madison cannot compete with them and maintain the same level of quality. Over time, we just can't provide the same educational or research experience at this difference in cost and in revenue. Furthermore, while the tuition freeze has been in place State funding per student has fallen at the same time. So 10 years ago, we were receiving the equivalent of $14,000 per student in state GPR dollars. Nope, that goes for a lot more than students. That goes into all the other things that we're doing around campus. This year, we are at 10,400, a huge decline at the same time that our tuition is frozen. Our student body is often looking at a very different set of comparison schools. They're comparing us to these other schools, Michigan and Minnesota. They're comparing us to East Coast private schools. And, none of them who are coming from out of state, and many of them, even who are coming from in-state and comparing us to out-of-state schools, want to come to the cheapest possible school. They want to come to the highest quality school. What we need to do is set our in-state tuition at market with our peers, the same way we set our out-of-state tuition. And then we absolutely have to be affordable for low and middle income students. That's what Bucky's Tuition Promise is all about. Let us pay, collect the same in-state revenue as a Michigan or an Illinois, and we will extend Bucky's Tuition Promise much further up into the income stream, so it helps not only low-income students, but at least partially subsidizes middle-income students as well. That's the way it should be set up. So recommendations: we're providing a high-value degree for many of our students, and we can remain affordable without charging bargain basement prices. Work with us and work with political leadership to allow us to institute in-state tuition policies more in line with our peers from the upper Midwest, while holding us accountable to provide the access to low and middle income families in Wisconsin who need that degree of financial aid. Tell us we can't let our percentage of students graduating with zero debt slip. That needs to stay at 57%. We can do that even while charging more in-state tuition for many students. And finally, last challenge. The divided and the very divisive political environment. And in some ways, this is the biggest and most existential threat to us as a public institution. I must say, first of all, let me be clear that I'm not talking about any one party. You see this on both sides of the aisle of places that want to use universities as a political shit in their political arguments. The criticisms may be different from the R's versus the D's, but it happens on both sides. And it's certainly not unique to Wisconsin. It's happening across the country, where we were once a nation that had high bipartisan support for higher education, and particularly these big flagship universities. We're now a nation deeply divided along political lines in terms of our support for public institutions, including universities. In Wisconsin, the Foundation and Alumni Association conducted a poll of 930 Wisconsin residents about a year ago. Some of the questions were designed to gauge public support for the university. The results were very similar to what we see nationally. About 70% of Democrats, but 45% of Republicans approved of what their public universities were doing. There was a similar divide on the question of whether a degree from UW-Madison is valuable and worth the cost. 65% of Democrats said yes, only 41% of Republicans agreed. I'm mentioning this not to criticize Republicans. Indeed, there's a whole bunch of bills in front of the legislature right now of great importance to us, and I deeply appreciate the leadership that has brought those bills forward. I want to thank those who've authored them, and I hope those who are going to sign them, and I hope Governor Evers will sign them as well. But I mentioned this partisan divide because for public institutions that depend upon the trust and the confidence of the people, this polarization is extremely dangerous. It can threaten not just the funding from the state, but the federal funding that we rely on as well. Some of those funds require state matches, require state support. It empowers politicians seeking to score points with voters to use our universities, and particularly our flagship campus, as political chips in their partisan wars. Two examples, one from each party. Forcing us to lower our annual fund balances limits our flexibility, hurts us relative to our peers, goes against all financial advice. Criticizing the ways in which we've enforced health and safety rules. And that criticism has come from both sides of the aisle, different criticism, but just as strong. I had a local politician here who was trying to close me down much of that first fall. This is all not helpful to our institution. And what do we need from the Board of Regents? You know this. No institution can survive long as a public institution without public support. And I request of you, I ask of you in the years ahead, please engage actively with political leadership on both sides of the aisle when they criticize the university. Sometimes that criticism is warranted and we need to improve. but sometimes it's just political posturing. And we need all of you to be a consistent voice of support for the value of a world-class research university. Speak up for the importance of our system institutions to the state, and of course, from my point of view, particularly the flagship. Let me conclude. 10 years ago, UW-Madison was essentially standing still, if not going backwards, on a variety of fronts, in large part because of reduced budgets. We've turned that around, thanks to all of your help, to our alumni, to the very good work of many of our faculty and staff. I have talked about some of our accomplishments and challenges and how to address those challenges in a way that keeps UW-Madison competitive and moving forward. But this is just the beginning of a conversation that needs to continue. We've made some important treatments in a strong future, but our peers are also investing. They're going up just as fast as we are. No one can take for granted the quality and the reputation of UW-Madison, assuming it will always remain strong. It doesn't take much for faculty salaries to fall again to the bottom, for graduate salaries to fall again to the bottom, for our research dollars to stall, for student interest to decline, or for us to start losing faculty to other universities. These are fragile institutions that need to be paid attention to every year. If we're going to maintain our reputation and our quality, we have to continue to invest and grow. To do that, we need resources, which we will help generate, combined with a smart strategy for the future, which is the job of the next chancellor. We also need governance that recognizes that the state's flagship campus is different from and competes nationally and internationally in ways that other system schools do not. And we need recognition from our political leadership of the value of this university to the state, Wisconsin. I want to thank all of you for the support that you have given me and UW-Madison over the 9 years that I have been here. It has been a pleasure working with you and all of your predecessors, and I appreciate everything that you've done. And this is just a warning that you can't stop now. There is more to be done, and I'm counting on all of you to make it happen. So thank you very much, and I will stop there and take questions. Thank you. Questions? Now you get easy. Now you get shoot me hard things.
Well, I don't know about you, but if I were a team member on Coach Blank's team and she laid out the keys to victory and gave it to me in that impassioned speech, I'd be willing to bust the doors and get on the field to implement it. So thank you for that, Coach. And does anyone have any questions? Regent Peter.
Thank you, Ed, and thank you, Chancellor. Excellent presentation as usual. We're going to miss that. I'm going to ask you to switch to kind of your economist hat, if you will. On slide 6, you talked about research dollars and how we saw a dip, and then we've seen an incline. Can you just give us a sense of nationally, whether it's NIH or NSF, are those dollars increasing from a CPI perspective, or are they more challenging to go after, and are we having better success? Does that make sense?
So research dollars tend to increase in spurts. So one reason I didn't show you the year before was when the ARA funds were available. We got a whole bunch of research dollars that year. Over the last decade, you've seen a slow increase in research. There's a whole bunch of packages currently in front of the legislature, the national legislature, some big increases in certain areas in research dollars, which the American Competes Act, I think, was just passed by the House. There's a similar act in the Senate. It's different in some of the things it does. If those two bills get reconciled and go through, there will be a big spurt in research dollars in the next couple of years, which is one reason why I've been working with Steve Ackerman to say we need to be prepared to move fast if those dollars come through in some of the key areas that they're trying to target. So I think you will see research dollar increases in the next year or two. We have grown faster in the last 5 years than federal dollars have grown, which is to say we've been more successful than the growth in federal dollars. Federal dollars have grown slowly, and I will tell you, every one of those top 20 to 25 schools are really working hard to do the same thing that we are. This is not one where, just sort of keeping doing business as usual will help us. We will just fall in the rankings if we do that. We've got to keep being very smart, very strategic, and putting some money in some key areas as seed money to be able to pull down the additional dollars.
Thanks. And then I just got a couple short ones. In slide 10, you talked about reduced student debt, which we spent a ton of time talking about
Yep.
the importance of that. Do we have a sense of that 57% that are coming out debt free? Do we have a crosstab of in-state versus out-of-state? Do you happen to know that?
I'm looking at the provost, which is higher in terms of debt levels between in-state versus out-of-state.
I think they're pretty even,
That's what I thought.
which is higher, might be on state, but
Yeah.
I think it's pretty even.
Yep. I know that among those who hold debt, out-of-state students hold more debt than in-state students. That's not surprising because they have bigger bills. But I don't think there's a huge in-state, out-of-state difference there. And in fact, with Bucky's tuition promise, the decline in state debt has been much in graduating without debt. The increase in graduating without debt has been much more rapid among in-state students. I think there used to be a bigger gap with more in-state students having to borrow because they come from lower income households. And, we've really worked to try to equalize that with the additional scholarships.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then finally, I mean, you look at the undergraduate enrollment growth, it's just astonishing. How would you say the campus is handling the increase in capacity, both, for room and board, but also class and lab space? Are we able to make that work?
So when we started on this, said the first thing we have to do is make sure we have the faculty to handle this. We don't want to deteriorate the academic experience. And we gave money particularly to the College of Arts and Sciences, given it's where many of the students start as freshmen, to make sure they could hire more faculty in those big classes, and then given additional money to other places where the students would flow through. So one of the reasons our number of faculty has increased is that was a very explicit plan that had to go along with the increase in students. I'm worried about the deterioration in student quality. We have not seen it. It's been an odd couple of years with the pandemic, right? So you can't quite compare apples and apples here, but we have not seen a big deterioration in things like student evaluations of classes, for instance. Our advising, if anything, I think has gotten better, even though they're serving more students. Rena Singer, who some of you met in the education committee, has just done a superb job of that. One reason I have this argument with others inside the university regularly, we're completely out of space on a number of things. Certainly some of our smart classrooms and, classrooms that require certain labs and things, we're out of space, and we're out of space on dormitories. Now, what would a reasonable university do in those situations? We've got a huge pool of applicants growing every year. We could certainly hire more faculty and absorb more students into space of the campus. We'd build some new dorms. We'd build some new classrooms. We have not been able to do that because we have no ability to do that. And the state legislature is quite opposed to funding dorms or funding just classroom buildings. You know how hard we had to fight to just build replacement classrooms for the humanities building. So there's a clear path forward here, but we can't take it right now with the constraints that we're under. We have worked hard to not deteriorate this too much. This last year, as some of you knew, we had an enrollment surprise. We took in more students than we wanted, and we're actually going to be dialing back the number of incoming students in the next class because we couldn't quite handle the number that came in, and I don't want to deteriorate that experience by admitting too many students.
Thank you.
Regent Weatherly.
I have a comment and then a question. So 7 years ago, I was on the UW alumni board, and we got a presentation before the announcement of the All Way Forward campaign about it, but they didn't release the goal number. And I remember going to Paula Bonner, the former CEO, saying, "What is it, like $500 million, $750 million?" She goes, "It's higher." She wouldn't tell me. So I come to the presentation tonight. So I go to the Kohl Center. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know. Well, I'm imagining numbers in my head. So I'm very much in the camp of the people that thought you were crazy when I saw 3.2 billion put on that screen. But then I believe you followed that with, we've already raised half of it. So I just want to commend you on that incredible number that I honestly thought was unimaginable, unaccomplishable. And the impact of how much money is being brought into the state and being spent in the state that otherwise wouldn't have been there if it wasn't for your efforts.
And of course, we've been helped by a very good run up in the stock market and, it's been a good period to be raising money in this way.
I would take credit where you get it, right? And to that end, and it's not only that, but also just my interactions, both as an alumni and on that board, along with the Regents, but also serving with you as you've led the URP board. I just want to say publicly, you are the most impressive leader of an organization I have ever seen. And it is a massive loss to the UW, to the state of Wisconsin, for you to leave. So thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
I also,
But you've got a question.
but I got a question. So you talked about, in better words than I can, how much harder it is to get into UW-Madison. When I was a student some 20 years ago, I know we don't use the ACT as much anymore, but the average ACT I think was about 27. I believe now, last time we took tests, it was probably a 30, a 31. Do you have a sense of the students 20 years ago that were qualified enough to be admitted, that succeeded at UW-Madison, that earned their diploma, but no longer would be able to get admitted, where they're going?
So let me be clear. In the state of Wisconsin, it is not true that it's harder to get into UW-Madison than in the past. Our number of applicants from the state of Wisconsin has been constant, and the number of students that we admit from the state of Wisconsin, if anything, is up a little bit from where it was 5 and 10 years ago. And that's explicitly by design. I mean, the Board of Regents have told me if I'm going to grow, I can't reduce the number of Wisconsin students. The result of that is we're actually admitting a higher share of high school graduates now than we ever have in history from when we have the data. I mean, I think it's like 5.5%. 10 years ago, we were admitting 4.5% of high school graduates. So within the state of Wisconsin, it is not harder to get into UW-Madison now than it was before. If you are out of state, it is definitely harder to get in because we now have far more applications and, accepting, even with growth, accepting every year a smaller share of them because the number of applications is growing faster than the number of new slots that we've opened. And I don't have it, those are often students applying to a lot of different schools. I do know that, we get more complaints from alumni, particularly out of state, when we don't admit their children than we probably used to in the past, because people are just flummoxed that their kid couldn't get in. But, then you give them the numbers of how many applicants and what the percentages look like, and, you can do the math. But it's not a Wisconsin-based issue. It is an out-of-state issue. And, I owe things to the state of Wisconsin. We need to be admitting the same number of students or even a little bit more in the higher percentage. That's a good thing. Out-of-state students, I don't quite have the same obligations to. Right?
Thank you.
Regent Klein.
Yes, thank you, Regent President Benny Deeds. Chancellor Blank, what an impressive history you've had with us, and thank you for giving us 9 years of your life and for having such great leadership skills that you could handle all the complex challenges, and I think they were complex and will continue to be. So we appreciate your cookbook on where to go from here, playbook, and all that. The one thing we keep talking about, though, is program revenue bonding. And, I always think greater flexibilities for Madison are clearly necessary. Where is that exactly? Did you say there was a bill pending?
No.
How do we as regents effectuate that? And I would just say, just by way of editorial comment, for those of us who went on the tour last night at the engineering school, it couldn't be more evident that those facilities are linked to research dollars. I'm sure student satisfaction and faculty satisfaction and all that, but as an economic engine, we just have to invest in that. And it seems to me that program revenue bonding is kind of the easy, it's not low-hanging fruit, but it would be an easy way to give those flexibilities. Yet we talk about it and I don't see it coming to a decision point.
So there's unfortunately, part of the issue is there are multiple stakeholders with interest in this, right? And that's what always makes something like this more difficult. I do believe over the last several years, we've made some real progress, particularly in the Assembly, in getting Assembly leaders to understand our need for program revenue bonding and greater flexibility. The Senate is a little tougher, but I think we could get there. We have never gotten a governor willing to put this on the table. And I think that's largely because DOA controls all of our capital projects, and moving to program revenue bonding threatens some of their power and control. And no bureaucratic organization gives that up easily. So, the governor is quite important in this as an actor. If we're going beyond program revenue bonding and talking about our ability to oversee some of our contracts, that of course is also DOA, but it also gets involved with the state contractors. And we have to persuade the state contractors it is to their benefit to do both of these things, give us program revenue bonding, give us more authority. I will tell you that I am past the point of believing that by going and presenting facts, we're going to get this done. I think we have to do some things that use a little bit of political muscle. I know that we are talking, are trying to do some things with our alumni who are contributors to a number of these places. I would hope that the Regents might be partners in that somewhat. That's a little delicate to do as a public institution, but it's going to take more than just facts and reasoning. We've been doing that too long and gotten nowhere.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Next, we'll hear from Alex Rowe, Senior Associate Vice President for Capital Planning and Budget, about the process her office uses to evaluate capital projects requests for consideration as part of the UW Systems 23-25 biennial budget request, which will be presented to the board later this year at our August meeting. I'm glad Alex is going to do this. I know many of us are new to the Board of Regents, relatively so, and it took me a long time to get the hang of some of these things. And I thought, and Alex agreed that it would be a good idea for us to hear from her and answer any questions you might have. So thanks for doing this, Alex.
That was before you told me I was following Chancellor Blank. So while I put the PowerPoint up, good afternoon. I'm going to give you a brief overview of the capital budgeting process and a short primer on DOA's project management responsibilities as an outcome of a conversation that we had at the board in October. So the first part is going to be about the capital budget, which is something that you will be asked to vote on in August later this year. So the capital planning and budgeting calendar is about 2.5 to 3 years in length. And we kicked the process off in the spring of the odd numbered year, hosting a planning conference in that fall. Project submittals are due in November. The highlighted area in pink is our internal UW process, somewhere around 12 to 18 months. The highlighted area in magenta is the DOA legislative gubernatorial period. We have no control over these schedules and activities. The yellow line is today. And as you can see, the biennial cycles overlap, meaning that we don't always know if projects are going to get enumerated before we have to start up the next cycle. So I'm not going to go into this graphic, but to say it represents the various documents that are used as part of the biennial capital budgeting process. And although we have reduced the number of forms and documents over the last 6 years, and we've tried to streamline our process, it's still based on the tenets of integrated planning, which is academic, student life, physical plant, and financial resources combined. A capital project has more to do with than just a physical structure. And planning that isn't just about the facility, but about the institution as a whole. Each project must have a capital budget project request, an accompanying project budget worksheet. Each institution must provide an overall project priority sequence summary and chart. And those are the first 3 documents you see at the top. We recommend that they also provide any supporting documentation, such as studies, to help make their case. And then we also use this opportunity to update building information, profiles, site surveys, and utilities. We do this every other year. So each campus undertakes planning in the spring and summer of the odd-numbered years. If we're going to update the region criteria, we do so no later than April of odd-numbered years, so institutions have time to incorporate the changes in their process. And our last update was in February of 2019 to consolidate duplicative and confusing criteria into a simplified category for operational impacts. We had multiple categories and we reduced them down to one. Institutions spend the spring semester working on their various constituencies to identify issues and refine project scopes. As our planning process is based on issues, what problems need to be resolved? There are 5 capital programs or project types as delineated by the DOA and State Building Commission policy. So a major project is defined as new space or a project costing more than $1 million. These include comprehensive renovations, multiple system renovations, or new construction. The all-agency program covers deferred maintenance and smaller projects valued between $300,000 and $3 million, except for utilities. Next is the minor facilities program. It's just 2 biennia old, and these are essentially large deferred maintenance projects, such as roofs and sprinklers, exterior envelopes, starting at about 3 and going up to 7.4 million. The instructional space program covers classrooms and laboratories up to 7.4, and this allows institutions opportunities to update and modernize the underutilized classrooms, develop new modalities such as flipped classrooms or active learning spaces, as Chancellor mentioned earlier, or just the ability to update science and art labs. Small projects are a subset of all agency projects costing less than $300,000. And all of these categories and funding limits are dictated by the enumeration process. And more importantly, set the AE selection process, because DOA uses 3 different selection processes for these projects. So as our team reviews and evaluates capital project submittals, these are the main prioritization schema that we use to assess the submittals. We've just finished reviewing major projects, and the team holds its first instructional space project evaluation and debate tomorrow. The all-agency submittal and evaluation takes place later this summer and fall. So you may wonder, what's an operational impact assessment? That's an issue that, if unresolved, threatens the ability to continue operation and/or provide a safe environment or impedes the delivery of essential programs and services. The criteria for evaluating projects. So this is that slide. Each project must pass prerequisites 2, 3, and 4. A few years ago, as part of President Cross's reform agenda, we instituted a no new net square footage requirement, criteria number 1, emphasizing the importance of considering renovation before construction of new space. 4 categories have been created to evaluate that new space. If an institution cannot meet one of the categories, the project does not move forward. Suffice to say, that's the one component that doesn't make our team very popular with our 13 institutions. Credit is given for replacement space, AKA demolishing another facility, the need to meet building codes or environmental issues. Are there space shortages due to academic or program enrollment growth? Does an institution need more beds, dining, or parking? Is it backed up by good financial planning? And lastly, what I affectionately refer to as obsolescence. The building requires more than 75% of the value of new to renovate or replace it. To be clear, if there is no new net square footage, criteria number 1 is moot. No new net square footage is considered assignable space. So if you're just adding an elevator or a restroom, mechanical spaces, those are non-assignable spaces. They don't count. The other prerequisites include, has there been evidence of planning for the project, such as a master or district plan, pre-design or feasibility study? In essence, have we seen this project before? Institutional readiness. Has swing space for displaced apartments been identified? operating budget resources quantified and in place, or does the institution have the capacity to manage the project? And lastly, are the necessary utility and infrastructure requirements identified? Are they included in the project or in a previous biennium? The physical development criteria, those are code violations and health and safety issues. Will there be demo work? How much budget is for reno versus new? And how much space will be renovated or created new? Programmatic considerations include how will the existing new space address or improve the overall quality and performance? How will existing versus new improve space utilization? How does the project improve operational efficiency, reduce costs, or aid in the recruitment or retention of students and staff? And how does it impact the institution's mission, graduation rate, intended program delivery? So one new thing that the Department of Administration has brought to our attention is that they like to see a pre-design or a feasibility study before that project, a major project, can be enumerated. So increasingly, they are refusing to accept and promote projects that don't have that for enumeration. So even though you approve the biennial capital budget every other August, we do bring projects back to you when they reach 50 to 75% of design. And that's large work of the Capital Planning Committee. This coincides with State Building Commission approval and the release of state borrowing. Only the State Building Commission can release state borrowing. This chart demonstrates the various times that you as a board are required to approve projects. Board policy delegates small projects and general fund supported borrowing only all agency back to staff or an institution. No board approval is required. However, if there is cash or program revenue of any type in an all agency program project, we do bring it to you for approval. So the second step in the evaluation process is a capital plan presentation, and we start those next week. This is an opportunity for each institution to weave the story. What challenges are they facing? What student life or academic needs are not being met with their current facilities? What happens if we don't do the project? What are those impacts? Financial impact. We continue to work closely with Sean's team to review program revenue financing. We are paying a lot more attention to operating impacts. Do they have the necessary resources, staffing, and funding? And this is where I ask a lot of pokey questions about academic array, enrollment plans, student life issues. Again, not making us the most popular system office staff. We use this presentation as a way to fill in the gaps from the submittals we received. We like to hear from our institutions directly, and we can then use those words and phrases to defend a project to this board and the legislature. So the approval process starts with region approval in August, after which we send the budget to DOA in September. They review all the requests and spend the fall questioning us. And so this biennium, we've instituted a little bit of a change with their technical staff to go through the underground utility and heating and cooling plant projects rather than wait until the fall. Our hope is that their expertise and our staff and our institutions can craft that subset of projects with better cost estimates by starting earlier. Sometime in February, the governor's office, through the work of the Department of Administration, produces a capital budget recommendation. And in March, the State Building Commission holds a hearing on the budget. After that occurs, it is transferred to Joint Finance by the first week of April and goes through the legislative process. Once the full process is complete, the governor signs it into budget, we hope, in the summer that year. And as I've mentioned before, we start the next planning cycle before that's complete. Questions? I know it's a lot in a short period of time, and you're ready to do something else.
There are a lot of steps in the process,
There are.
and it's hard to keep track of them all. But if you think of something, I'm sure Alex would be available to answer your questions in the future. She's always ready to do that. So, are there any other questions, statements? Okay. Thank you, Alex.
Up. So Super quick, I'll go quick. This is the DOA managed projects. The majority of our capital program is overseen and managed by the Division of Facilities Development at the Department of Administration. Only a small portion of our work is done through gift and grant UW managed. Most of our projects are the result of an institutional master plan, except deferred maintenance, utility, or heating and cooling plant projects. And each institution initiates the project generally using the documentation that came through the capital planning cycle. They identify or request assistance financing a pre-design or feasibility study to set the scope, schedule, and budget. And we work with the institutions to send it over to the DOA to select the AE team. Anything over $7.4 million requires a full interview. That process takes 4 to 5 months. Other selection processes costing less than 7.4 usually take about a couple of months. And just to make it a little more challenging, DOA has been known to change our scope on us before we start the selection process. So DOA manages the selection of all consultants and executes the contracts. We are not a party to these contracts. They manage the design process with input from our institutions and our CPB team. We work with them to identify when the project will be brought to the board and building commission to receive approval. DFD, in consultation with the governor's office, sets the building commission agenda. The governor is the chair of the building commission. It has 8 members, 6 legislators, 1 citizen member, and the governor. And the DFD administrator is considered the secretary of the SBC. So a few process improvement measures that we took into place a few years ago include starting pre-design or feasibility before enumeration. This goes back to what I said earlier about DOA liking to see that earlier. It allows us to now begin to flesh out the project. So we clearly understand what we need to include in the project. We understand its size, cost, schedule, and other impacts like utilities, demo, or acquisition. Another process improvement measure, leave the project in design as long as financially feasible to ensure we are on budget and have worked through program criteria. Typically, we have sought approval around 35%. Now we're at 50 to 75%. The longer we stay in design, the more we know about the project and the firmer the budget is. So what's the university responsible for? So they establish the project, and they usually do that as part of the planning process. And they also write the request for AE selection. They provide a project charter, which delineates the project's scope, risks, challenges, constraints, budgets, goals, and decision makers at the institutional level. And in fact, who has the final say at the institution. And although DOA selects the consultants, we are responsible for the environmental review process and coordinating with other regulatory agencies like the Wisconsin Historical Society. We get to participate in all design and coordination meetings. We get to review the project documents. However, we are not a party to the contract, so we don't usually get to see contract amendments for design contracts ahead of time. During construction, the DFD manages the document process with input from us, but they bid the project, execute the construction contract. We are not a party to those contracts, and we have no role in determining the lowest responsible bidder. They have sole responsibility for managing the project budget within their financial system. We transfer funds to them for use on the project if cash or gifts are part of the mix. And they set the job meetings and site visits and control interactions with contractors. We get to attend meetings, coordinate facilities work, access control systems, for example, or lock sets, and provide feedback when requested or even when it's not. We are responsible for move-in, facilities coordination, and user-client interface. I'm not going to walk you through the chart. I'm only showing it to you to demonstrate that as a result of some rather high-profile challenges that you probably remember a few years ago, President Cross wanted to identify process improvement opportunities. So we plotted out the project process. There's another version that shows what happens if you had to add money or change scope and all the changes and approvals that requires. So this chart has led to some process improvement measures. As a result of the issues raised during the recent challenges with the chemistry building, we've been holding high-level meetings with the president, chancellor, DOA secretary, and other senior staff to identify ways to improve project management and increase our visibility into the DOA schedule and budget decision-making process. A draft MOU with 16 points has been circulated among the group. It includes items such as an annual joint review of contract revisions, pursuing industry standard contract terms for insurance, liability, and risk. Other items include change order review and approval, regular reporting on projects, dedicated resources to the UW, and more transparent financial tools. A separate endeavor started last year through the efforts of UW-Madison seeks to delineate the roles and responsibilities of the DOA versus the university versus the system office. And that work has been ongoing with a team of technical staff from the three organizations. And we've learned through some high-profile projects, like Babcock, that there isn't clarity about the various roles for critical activities in a project. There are a lot of expectations about who was doing what, but those expectations are not clearly understood among the various organizations. As this endeavor moves along, we may see modifications to the responsibilities components that I've listed on the previous slides. From our perspective, work product developed as part of this initiative can be widely disseminated among all the UW institutions. And lastly, the DOA is in the process of replacing their legacy management system, WISBuild, with an industry-based software system, eBuilder, used by many owners and universities across the country. And currently, the system they have isn't really providing any type of data or real-time reporting. We believe some of the longstanding requests from us to DOA will be resolved with the implementation of the new system, and they expect to have that ready for use later in the year. And that's everything we can, that may need.
It's a lot. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, Alex. Well, that concludes our open session. The plan is to have a motion to move into closed session, take a 10-minute and no more break after that, and then come back. So we got a full agenda. So Regent Wall.
I move that the Board of Regents move into closed session to consider personal histories related to a naming at UW-La Crosse as permitted by S 19.85, 1, and F of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider an amended employment agreement and additional compensation agreement for a UW-Madison assistant football coach, defensive coordinator, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, C, and E of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider an amended employment agreement and additional compensation agreement for a UW-Madison assistant football coach, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, C, and E of the Wisconsin statute. Consider an amended employment agreement and additional compensation agreement for a UW-Madison assistant football coach, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, C, and E of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider a compensation adjustment for an individual with a salary that exceeds 75% of the system president's salary, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, and C of the Wisconsin statutes. Consider strategies for crime detection and prevention, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, and D of the Wisconsin statutes. And consider pay plan / compensation adjustments for chancellors and the UW system president, as permitted by S 19.85, 1, and C of the Wisconsin statutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yes.
Regent President Benny Deeds.
Yes.
Regent Vice President Walsh. Regent Atwell. Regent.
Do you need a second?
Regent Bogus.
Second.
Yes.
Regent Cologne.
Yes.
I can't hear anything.
Regent Freebie. Regent Jones.
Good?
Regent Klein. Regent Miller. Regent Posh.
Yes.
Regent Drew Peterson.
Yes.
Regent Chris Peterson.
Chris.
Yes.
Just say yes.
Aye. Regent Samples. Regent Samples.
Yes.
Regent Tucker. Regent Underling.
Yes.
Weatherly.
All right.